Your primary care provider walks your life journey with you. You create a relationship, you talk about full scopes of things, and I think that in being able to build the relationships with our care providers has allowed them to have a confidant, right? Especially in a pandemic, someone they feel comfortable talking to, expressing concern, having, really engaging discussions around health. And so we follow them along the continuum of care. We want to catch things early, keep them out of the hospital, and make sure that they have a quality of life. I would like our patients and community to understand that we're in this together. I want them to feel like we understand what they're going through, and that the work that we do is critical to their health, just like they're critical to me and to us and our providers, and truly seeing that partnership in the journey of their health. When I'm in the clinic and I get to see my neighbor come in and he gets to tell me how amazing his care was, that makes me feel really fulfilled.
Welcome to the 28th Annual Sedona International Film Festival, featuring the best independent films from around the world. A special thank you to our title sponsor, Northern Arizona Healthcare. We also want to thank our presenting sponsors, Yavapai College, the City of Sedona, Cleaner Quicker Car Wash, the Clooney Family Foundation, Goldenstein Gallery, BMO Harris Bank, Karen Dunlap Caldwell Banker Global Luxury. Our title and presenting sponsors are wearing light blue lanyards. If you see them around the festival, please thank them for their generous financial support. And please thank the dozens of festival sponsors and donors who make our festival possible. You'll find the complete list on page 2 of your festival program, and they'll be spotted around the festival wearing bright pink lanyards. Please thank them for their contribution to the success of the festival. A special thank you to the sponsor of this theater, Goldenstein Gallery. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the festival. And now, here's your theater host.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Pat Schweiss, the director of the Sedona International Film Festival. We are truly honored to have you all here today to honor our own conservation legacy recipient, and that is Mr. Bruce Babbitt. We are truly honored to have Mr. Bruce Babbitt in the house. You will get to meet him a little bit later on. Thank you, Mr. Babbitt. And we're thrilled to have all of you here. It means so much to us that you came out to check this out. This is one of our biggest crowds. I gotta say it's because of you, Bruce, not because of me, but we're glad to have you. So we're very glad to have you all here, coming out and seeing films and enjoying events the way they should be seen on the big screen. So give yourselves a round of applause for coming back to a live Sedona International Film Festival. Please help me thank the incredible technicians up in the booth that made the magic happen. That's Jeremy Ferguson and Shane Richards. Thank you guys very, very much. Give a very big round of applause for all of our sponsors that make the festival happen. We're so grateful for their financial support. And one quick little bit of business before we get on to the show. Some of you received a ballot when you walked in here today. You can crunch that up and stick it in your pocket. This is not a voting segment. This film is not in competition in the festival, nor is this segment. So we stopped it before too many of you got in. But if you received a ballot, you can just ignore that for this segment, all right? Fair enough? Awesome. And are your cell phones turned off? We want to whisk you away into this incredible conversation without interruption from the outside world. And I want to take a little bit of time. Normally, you all know that I speak fairly off the cuff and don't usually use a lot of notes. But I don't want to mess this up because we have a sponsor, a very important sponsor, the Health First Foundation of Northern Arizona, that is sponsoring this very special event with Mr. Bruce Babbitt. And it was wonderful to be able to connect Bruce Babbitt with Lisa Schnebley. Where are you, Lisa? Right over there. The great-granddaughter of Sedona Schnebley herself, that our city is named after. She and Mr. Babbitt have been friends for many, many years, and so they have reconnected to come up and enjoy the festival together. And Lisa is part of our Health First Foundation. They have been a wonderful sponsor for many, many years. Their name is new, but their commitment to our community and to health matters is not new. It's been going on for many, many, many years. And their sponsorship this afternoon is very special to me because they recently honored my mother and father-in-law, Robert and Loretta Larson, with their Philanthropist of the Year award. My beautiful wife, whose mom and dad that was, is right over there, Elizabeth Larson Schweiss. I have the privilege and honor of being married into this incredible family, and they started the Red Rock News, but it's almost 60 years old, back in 1963 and had been the only newspaper in Sedona for all those years. I was lucky enough to work for them before I took this gig, and I've been married to their daughter for 31 years. We lost both Robert and Loretta just in the last couple of years, last 2 or 3, 4 years. And what they did, and how this ties in with the legacy that Bruce Babbitt has left here, is the legacy that the Larson family and Robert and Loretta Larson have left. In their passing, they had left a very sizable amount of money, the largest gift to the foundation ever made. And I'm very, very proud of that. I'm very selfish, I am, because the gift that they left, many of you may not know this, it's gorgeous. It's that land, that corner on the airport road in 89A with the funky round building. That was my mother and father-in-law's. I had been lobbying them for years to give me that land for a theater. But they had promised it to the foundation in the mid-90s as part of their legacy. So who could argue with that? So their legacy is going to live on and on and on. The foundation was gifted that land and sold it so they could use the cash to do good things in our community. So we are truly honored that the Larson legacy will live on. And now's where I'm going to start to read. The first realization of that gift is Health First commitment to a critical local program that supports our children, families, and businesses. Health First is matching up to $50,000 in donations from this Larson gift, a portion of the Larson gift, to benefit the Wildcat Extended Day program at West Sedona School, a designated Title I school. The Title I designation means that more than 70% of the students are from low-income families. Wildcat Extended Day provides free before and after school daycare that gives parents peace of mind, knowing that their children are well cared for while they're still at work. Unfortunately, the Extended Day Care program, which enhances the learning and provides these students with some unparalleled activities and a great foundation for healthy living, is not funded by the school district. So it takes donations and requires donor support to make this happen. Outside this room and in the film festival program, they're going to have a booth. There's also a QR code you can scan that will take you directly to a donation page. And like I said, the first part of the Larson gift, they're matching it with $50,000 of that to make this program worth $100,000 and get these kids the wonderful, wonderful after-school care that they need. So we really appreciate it. Go and visit Sandra. Where's Sandra Kowalski sitting? She's the director of the foundation. She's right up there. Give it up for Sandra and Lisa and their entire team. And we also want to acknowledge, and I swear I was going to find out where they were sitting, Dr. Serge and Kathy Wright. Where are you in the house? Right here. Stand up and take a bow. They have made the first gift to this already, so we can start the matching program. So thank you, Serge and Kathy. We appreciate it very, very much. On behalf of the Larson family and, of course, the Health First Foundation. So do go out and check that out, and please visit them. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And speaking of opportunities, also out in the lobby, the benefactors of the Red Rock State Park. We are so lucky. Give it up for them. A bunch of their board members are right there in the front of the second section. We have this incredible program today because of what they did. This was so wonderful that the benefactors of the Red Rock State Park, if any of you haven't been there, Andrea's going to talk about it a little bit more in her segment with Mr. Babbitt. We have a treasure in Sedona. We have that treasure because of Mr. Bruce Babbitt. And we have the benefactors of the Red Rocks who happened to see a film at our festival done by filmmakers who are very, very close to me. One of them is my tech director, and one of them is my dear personal friend, Ron Melman, who also has Sedona Media Services. So Brian Reinhardt, stand up. He's the director of the film. Stand up and take a bow for the film you're about to see. Ron Melman, stand up and take a bow. He's the producer of the film you're about to see. Film festivals are where connections are made, and I'm so proud of this because just a few years ago, Brian Reinhardt and Ron Melman had the top award-winning festival in our lineup. If any of you got to see it, it's called The Valley, about how the town of Telluride saved their valley from development. The benefactors saw this and wanted to put together a wonderful film on Red Rock State Park. So this is the film that when visitors come to the park, this film shows at the Visitors Center. I can assure you Ron and Brian have never seen their film projected on quite this large a screen. So it's a very special opportunity for them. And it's a very special opportunity because the benefactors of the Red Rock State Park paid for this film and made this happen. And so I hope you'll also consider supporting them. They have a booth right outside the door of the Performing Arts Center. Make a donation to keep this legacy going as well. We'll remind you of that, of course, during the Q&A. But let's give a nice round of applause for Brian, Ron, benefactors of the State Park. Thank you all so very, very much. for bringing us this special program and for bringing us Mr. Bruce Babbitt. So what we're going to do, we're going to roll into this 20-minute film of Red Rock State Park, and then we're going to introduce our special guest. Please know how much we appreciate you being in our audience. We appreciate your support of our festival and of Red Rock State Park. Enjoy the show.
I'm Bruce Babbitt. I grew up nearby. I love this land. I served as governor of Arizona from 1978 to 1987, and I'm pleased to welcome you to Red Rock State Park. Back in 1980, on a splendid morning, I set out with our children to hike along Oak Creek. We eventually came to an open valley, in fact, where we are today. Then we saw the no trespassing signs. A caretaker showed up and warned us away. Hoping that he might relent, I mentioned that I was the governor of Arizona. He replied, "Yeah, I've heard that fairy tale 100 times. Private property, and you can't hike here." Then, back at the state capitol, I learned that the property was on the market for development. It ought to be preserved, I thought. So I put my staff to work, and here we are today in Red Rock State Park. The sublime Red Rock vistas all around you are, of course, known the world over. However, the story of this region really begins with the riparian forests along the waters of Oak Creek. It is the streams like Oak Creek that have sculpted and shaped the landscape that you see. Its water brings life to the land. And wetlands in the desert are a miracle of nature, sustaining resident wildlife and drawing in migratory birds with the changing seasons. My favorite hike here is the easy trail along the creek in the shade of the cottonwood, sycamores, and alders, where you can observe and learn about the beauty and diversity of our natural world. The park staff and volunteers are eager to help, to answer your questions, and to show you around.
One of the most challenging things, I think, for visitors to get their minds around regarding geology of the Sedona area is the huge time scales that it took for these sedimentary layers to be laid down to form the formations that we have here in Sedona.
The beautiful setting of Red Rock State Park is the product of events that occurred in the Permian period of geological time. The planet did not look the same as it does today because plate tectonics had brought the continents together into a large continental mass called Pangaea, what is now Arizona, set near the equator. And as you can imagine, life was quite different 275 million years ago. It was a time just before the appearance of the dinosaurs, but some very impressive vertebrate animals had left their fossil remains. As Permian time proceeded, thick rock units were deposited in the Sedona area. Ancient mountains, precursors to our current Rocky Mountains, were being eroded, and the sands and silts were transported to what is now northern Arizona. In time, they formed a series of stacked horizontal bedrock layers that geologists call formations. The lowest and oldest unit was the Hermit Shale, made of silt and clay. It's easily eroded, and thus it creates flat areas upon which the city of Sedona could be built. Then sands were carried into the area to form the Schnebly Hill Formation. That was Sedona Schnebly's name that is being honored. The sandstone was colored shades of red because it included iron oxides. The hard sandstones were resistant to erosion, so they built the cliffs rather than flat benches. Our many hiking trails wind through the Schnebly Hill in the midst of a juniper pinyon pine forest. In time, extensive desert dunes covered the area. They were similar to what we see in the Sahara Desert, and they retain the distinctive cross-bedding of dunes. The whitish and pinkish Coconino sandstone sits on top of the reddish Nebley Hill and can be recognized from many hiking spots. The last of the major Permian sedimentary rocks is the Kaibab limestone, deposited in a warm sea with sponges, corals, and other marine organisms. The Kaibab limestone occurs at the top of the Grand Canyon and is the huge flat surface of the Colorado Plateau. Millions of years after the Permian rocks were deposited, the region was pulled apart by major extinction. When that happens, a central keystone drops down, creating a huge valley. Verde Valley is filled with silts and various sedimentary rocks, which make up the white and gray layers that you see in the Cottonwood-Clarkdale area and throughout the Verde Valley. Recently, that's a geologist speaking about 6 to 8 million years ago, huge sheets of molten rock spread out from the San Francisco Peak area around Flagstaff. These hot basaltic rocks could flow over large areas, and as they cooled, they created the dark columnar rocks that you see at the top of the local geological units. So enjoy the scenery. Keep in mind that interesting geological events were important in creating our spectacular red rock country.
Sedona and the Verde Valley were likely visited by Paleo-Indian cultures from approximately 11,000 to 9,000 BC, during which time there was evidence that big game animals roamed the area. However, the evidence for occupation by Clovis culture peoples is limited to just a handful of Clovis points. Sometime after 9,000 BC, evidence of big game hunting seems to have disappeared, possibly because there was a crash in the populations of big game. But scholars have different theories about why the big game may have disappeared from the area. The next time period with evidence of human occupation is called the Archaic period by archaeologists. This was from 3000 BC to about 300 AD. These peoples were thought to practice migratory hunting and gathering lifestyle. Some of the archaeological finds from this area included clothing made from plant material, basketry, and grinding stones that weren't part of the archaeological record from earlier inhabitants. In about 650 AD, people from what is referred to as the Sinagua culture are thought to have moved into the area from the east, with most of the population living near the middle stretches of the Verde River. People living in the Verde River at that time bridged the geographical gap between the Hohokam culture of the south and the ancestral Pueblo culture to the north. You can see evidence of trading between these three groups in the archaeological record. After about 1125 AD, the Sinagua expanded away from the rivers and began constructing cliff dwellings in the red rock canyons of the area that came to be known as Sedona. The reason archaeologists refer to this culture as Sinagua is due to the evidence that they practiced dry farming techniques. This name is derived from the Spanish, which means without water. The Sinagua culture likely reached its maximum extent of territory between 1150 and 1300 AD. It appears that a majority of the peoples of the Sinagua culture abandoned the entire Verde Valley around 1400. Prior to European colonization, the Verde Valley was overlapping territory for the current-day Yavapai and Western Apache tribal groups. Many archaeologists believe that the Yavapai moved into the Verde Valley sometime around 1300, but others believe they may be the descendants of the earlier Sinagua culture. Apache tribal groups were historically semi-nomadic and traveled across vast areas, leaving few artifacts behind that would allow archaeologists to estimate when they arrived in the region. Historical sources suggest that beginning in the early 18th century, the Tonto band of Apache began moving into the eastern edge of the Yavapai's territory, and references specifically mentioned Apache in the Verde Valley by the 1850s. Disputes between European homesteaders and indigenous peoples in the Verde Valley became increasingly contentious in the 1860s. By 1875, most of the Yavapai and Apache who were living in the Rio Verde Reservation were forcibly marched nearly 180 miles to the San Carlos Reservation over rough terrain and through difficult winter conditions. The modern Yavapai Apache Nation is an artificial amalgamation of two distinct cultures. This resulted from legislation passed by Congress in 1934, known as the Indian Reorganization Act, in an effort to establish a single tribe in the Upper Verde Valley. European American homesteaders began to occupy the area now called Sedona in the late 1800s. By 1900, about 15 homestead families, including the family of T.C. Schnebley, lived in the area. The 286 acres that encompass Red Rock State Park were actually part of several different homesteads. Most notable were the Shermans, who lived on the north side of Oak Creek, and the Armijos, who lived on the south side. Pieces of that history can still be seen in the park today. The Willow House was built by the Shermans, but was expanded by subsequent owners. On the south side of the creek, park visitors can walk over portions of the Armijo Ditch, which is still used today to deliver water from Oak Creek to Cross Creek Ranch on the western border of the park. In the early 1940s, Jack and Helen Fry purchased about 800 acres of land that includes Red Rock State Park. Jack Fry was the president of TWA, one of the early commercial airlines in the United States. The house they built on the property became known as the House of Apache Fires and is situated on the top of a cliff above the creek. Helen Fry retained ownership of the property after she and Jack divorced in 1950. Over time, she sold off pieces of the original 800 acres, and the 286 acres that became Red Rock State Park changed ownership several times before it was acquired by the state of Arizona in the 1980s.
Red Rock State Park opened its doors to the public in the fall of 1991 with three main components to the park mission statement. First and foremost, our mission is to preserve and protect the riparian habitat associated with Oak Creek that flows through our park. Secondly, we provide environmental education programs to the public. Our hope is to inspire future stewards of our public lands. And lastly, our mission is to provide low-impact recreation like hiking and picnicking to the general public. The park boasts over 5 miles of interconnected loop trails, all of which are rated easy to moderate. We have trails that will take you right next to Oak Creek, down in the riparian habitat, and ridge trails that will take you through the Pinyon Juniper community. The ridge trails offer spectacular views of the West Sedona rock formations, which include Cathedral Rock, Seven Warriors, Napoleon's Tomb, the Three Sisters, and Button Mountain. What do I do if I see a snake? This is a question we get asked a lot here at the park. The quick answer is just to back away from it. Like most animals, snakes have no desire to have any kind of interaction with us humans. We are far too big to be considered food to them. Rodents and other small mammals are their primary source of food. But that doesn't mean a rattlesnake won't strike in self-defense when it is threatened. Which is why the advice I always give to the question, what do I do if I see a rattlesnake? Is just to back away and give that snake plenty of space. Did you know that about 55% of all rattlesnake bites happen to males between the ages of 17 and 27? And about 85% of those snake bites happen on the fingers and the hands. Of the 7,000 to 8,000 snake bites each year, less than 10 of those are fatal. Our fear of snakes is a perfectly human reaction. It's self-preservation. So if you watch where you place your hands, don't pick the snakes up, and give them plenty of space, then there's nothing to be afraid of. If we show them respect and respect their ability to defend themselves, we can quite happily coexist.
Creek is one of the main draws for visitors to Red Rock State Park, and our mission at Red Rock State Park will always be to protect the portion of the creek that flows through the park in order to maintain the natural function of the riparian system and to provide environmental education opportunities to the public for years to come. Red Rock State Park's Connection program is our environmental education program that offers outdoor, hands-on field trips for kindergarten through 8th grade students. The goal of the program is to connect what students are learning in their traditional classroom settings with engaging outdoor learning activities. We offer programs on wildlife, geology, archaeology, insects, water, and botany. The programs are led by our rangers and park volunteers, and they include everything from examining macroinvertebrates in our creek to doing mock archaeology digs, learning how to identify animal tracks, taking guided nature hikes, and even earning a junior ranger badge. The program's busiest times of year are the spring and fall, and we can easily see 500 students in the fall and over 1,000 in the spring. The communities around our park are mostly rural, and they often lack funding for their school districts. So it's very important that we, as a state agency, can offer these types of extracurricular activities to local students, as well as all Arizona students. We want the students who visit our park to have a positive outdoor recreation experience where they can learn to safely and responsibly enjoy the outdoors and make real-life connections to the material they are learning in school. This allows them to make new discoveries and develop an understanding of the interconnectedness of our natural world. Our hope is that the experience these students have with our program helps to plant the seed of a lifelong stewardship ethic and an appreciation of the outdoors.
We also have lots of programs geared towards adults, like our daily nature walks, bi-weekly bird walks, monthly specialty hikes, such as geology, archaeology, ethnobotany, and even moonlight hikes once a month during certain times of the year. We also have 2 star parties each year, sponsored by a local astronomy group. We also have an interpretive museum on the bottom level of our gift shop, and that has some great displays on natural and cultural resource topics related to the Sedona area. Red Rock State Park is also part of the Lower Oak Creek Important Bird Area, which extends from the park all the way downstreams to Page Springs Hatchery in Cornville. During spring and fall seasons, it's possible to have over 100 different species of birds using the habitat at the park, as they stop over during their long migration from as far south as South America all the way up to northern US and Canada. That's why protecting the riparian habitat that we have in the park is so important, because it provides a stopover habitat where migrating birds can rest and refuel so that they can make it up to their breeding grounds in the spring and then back to their wintering grounds during the fall. There's so much to learn about the natural world. Our goal here at Red Rock State Park is to inspire visitors to think about human impacts on the natural world, both good and bad, and that they leave the park at the end of their visit wanting to learn more.
Parks and public lands are a wonderful part of our national heritage. Remember to support parks and public lands wherever you live, and enjoy your stay.
And please give a nice round of applause for our filmmakers, Brian Reinhardt and Ron Melman and their team. Well done. And a big round of applause for benefactors of the Red Rock State Park. Thank you very, very much for making this possible. And a nice little plug for those of you who were lucky enough to see The Valley years ago. We're happy to announce it's getting a release on PBS later this spring under its new title, Forever Wild. So do check out your PBS listings. Congratulations, Brian and Ron, on that. And as all filmmakers are looking for, they're always looking for nice donations and charitable things to help market that. So see Brian and Ron after the show. Again, one more round of applause. Great film, guys. Really wonderful. It gives me great pleasure to present your host for the evening, your hostess that's going to be moderating the talk with Mr. Bruce Babbitt. Andrea Christel is a very, very special friend. I've known her for several years when she started philosophy in the public interest up at NAU. She's now part of the benefactors of Red Rock State Park, and she and her wonderful group made this whole afternoon possible. Andrea has a very special connection to the park. She also has her Sedona philosophy experience that she does, and she does philosophy and nature hikes out at that park to teach people all about our beautiful place. So please welcome your hostess for the afternoon, Andrea Christel.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. We're going to start today. Bruce is going to share some remarks with you. As you've heard and you know, he was governor of Arizona. He was also Secretary of the Interior under President Bill Clinton. But I want to tell you just a little bit about the way he works, not just the things that he's done. I'm just curious, how many of you here in the audience today have been to Red Rock State Park? Oh, that's really wonderful. That's really wonderful. And you know, it's such an interesting story of how that park was created, but what many people don't know is that everything that Governor Babbitt went through at the time involved working with the Animax Mining Company. And so he actually arranged for a mining company to come in and purchase the land from Eckankar, who held at the time. They were a self-described alternative religion. We have a lot of those in Sedona, right? Okay. So a mining company came in, purchased the land. That same mining company had been leasing land down in Tucson, and he arranged for a land swap. There are more details. I won't go into all the details, but the reason I'm telling this story is because when we think about a conservation legacy, we don't always think about someone who worked effectively with mining companies. And the person that you're about to hear from today is someone who has worked with mining companies, with business interests that have established public lands in Arizona, public lands across the western United States, and now is doing that work globally. It's because of his ability to compromise, to listen, and to understand all sides, which is something we need so much today. So please help me in welcoming Bruce Babbitt.
Is it okay if I take my mask off? Okay. I want to follow the rules. I think they're important. Delighted to see all of you out here. This is really an extraordinary turnout, and for me, a very wonderful and personal experience. I want to start, I can get this all sorted out here, by saying a word about the benefactors of Red Rock State Park. You have created an enormously important and valuable resource in this community. When we established the park way back in the Lincoln administration, whenever it was, way back when, the state didn't do very much to take care of it. They basically, it was not a very environmentally oriented legislature. They basically cut the budgets and essentially abandoned the place. And believe it or not, at one point, the state park director was going to turn it into a campground. And it just languished endlessly until a few dedicated people in this town stepped forward and said, we're going to make something out of this, because if the state of Arizona is not going to take care of it,
will adopt this park and really make it into something. And what you've done is really quite wonderful. The theory of a park as a learning platform, a place not only to recreate, but to come to a deeper understanding of what it's all about. You've done a marvelous job. And then, to reach out in the education concept to get the local school districts in, I salute you benefactors. You have made this park what it is today. And let me just say from my perspective, thank you very much. It's really made a difference. I've had a number of people ask me, Bruce, why is it that you have gotten so fanatically attached to Sedona and Oak Creek and the Verde Valley? And I'm going to just share a little bit of that with you. It kind of happened in an odd way. It began on the morning of March 4th, 1978. Prior to that time, I had been the Attorney General of this extraordinary state, busy chasing bad guys and organized crime and land frauds, and really at it. I hadn't thought much about the environment, about the places that I came from. That all changed on the morning of March 4th, 1978. I got a phone call at about 4:30 in the morning. There was a voice on the other end. It was from the governor's office. And the voice said, Mr. Babbitt, you are now the governor of Arizona. And it turned out that the sitting governor had died suddenly in the middle of the night. And the people in charge rushed to the state constitution to say, well, who's next? We didn't have a lieutenant governor, we don't today. And it turns out that I was next. I went about my business, but it quickly involved the Verde Valley because there was a huge controversy about the possible construction of a dam on the Verde River called Orm Dam, which would have flooded out a couple of Indian tribes, ruined miles of riparian habitat, and I thought totally unnecessary. And I looked at it all, and all of the political establishment was in favor, everyone. And I swallowed hard and said, I don't know what this is going to do to my political career, my newfound political career, a couple of months old. And I stepped up and I said, we're going to kill that dam. And I got away with it. And the reason was that we got a bunch of other organizations, Andrea's mining companies and all, the utilities, and we found an alternative to spend a couple $100 million federal dollars raising Roosevelt Dam, which some of you may know is further up on the Salt River watershed. And in the course of those negotiations, I started thinking about the Verde Valley and the Verde River. And I came up with an idea, and I floated it in these discussions. This was a $200 million project to raise Roosevelt Dam. And I just threw it out. I said, in order to approve this, I need a couple $1 million to buy riparian habitat in the Verde Valley for mitigation. And to my surprise, no one objected. And the lesson I learned from that is when there's a lot of money involved, a couple $100 million, nobody is even going to know what you're talking about when you say, give me a couple $1 million to take care of some trees in the Verde Valley. And that was the beginning of the Verde Valley, the Verde River Greenway, which now extends from Clarkdale down toward Camp Verde. We went out, tramped across the river, talked to landowners, bit by bit, it all came together. Now, I recite that just to say this, to make the point that there are always unexpected events, and the important thing is to always be looking for the opportunity. So I came back to Oak Creek and started looking for opportunities, wandering around, loving this place, remembering my childhood when I lived in Flagstaff down here. And I came upon an idea. I was always interested in Slide Rock because there's that wonderful apple orchard that the Pendley family for generations had tended on that bank above the creek, all that red rock background up there. And I thought, that looks really interesting. So I went up one Sunday afternoon and found old Tom Pendley, who was the descendant, who owned the place there. And I struck up a conversation and I said, you know, Tom, it would really be something if someday you would like to sell this to the state for a park. Thinking I've got it. Tom kind of looked at me and he said, Bruce, I would never sell my land to the government. Never. I won't sell it to the Forest Service. I won't sell it to the state. And furthermore, I'm in discussions to turn this into a John Wayne theme park. I walked away crestfallen. I said, well, you never know. And I would go back up there on Sunday afternoon with my kids, and I'd go find him up in the little place where he was living on the land, and just sit around and kind of talk about the old days. A little history always warms people up. And we talked about his family and my family from Flagstaff. And all of a sudden I could see him kind of easing up a little bit. He said, Bruce, you know, back in the 1930s, my father was having a hard time. They were thinking about foreclosing on me, on my father. And he said, your grandfather up in Flagstaff loaned me several $1,000s with no due date on the note. And that saved the Pendley's property. And I'm thinking now, well, let's just keep talking and listening a little bit. And he said, Bruce, I know you're the governor, but I just can't think of my land going to the government. So I said, well, Tom, how about maybe we could find a foundation to buy the land? And we talked a few more times. And he started to think, well, that's not the government. That's probably okay. So I'm walking away saying, well, now, where's the foundation and where's the money? We organized a little foundation. It's up there, is it around the state to this day, called the Parklands Foundation. Seized a name out of the air. And so I said, Tom, we got it all going, but we still don't have any money. The Arizona legislature then has now had little to no interest in state parks. I take that back. I don't mean to be critical. State legislature didn't warm to the idea, okay? So, it turned out, as I was back in the Capitol one day, that there was a bill that the legislature was sending to me called interstate banking. The big Arizona banks were under an old law which did not allow them to do banking beyond state boundaries. This was going to free them to do what banks do, which is really expand and make money. And I thought, this is a possibility. So I called in the heads of the banks to my conference room. And I looked at that piece of legislation, and I said, well, it looks, there's arguments for and against interstate banking. I can't really decide. But there's this issue of finding $4 million for a park. And I wouldn't want you to buy it, I want you to loan the money. And I said, well, how will we ever get the money back once we've loaned it? And I said, look, this legislature loves bankers. You loan us the money, we buy the park, you go to the legislature, and they'll give you whatever you want. Well, that's Slide Rock State Park. Okay, where are we today? I'd like to leave you with just a couple thoughts about the future, because this issue of riparian protection is never entirely done. The waters of this creek are what the Environmental Protection Agency calls impaired waters, which means there's too much stuff out there in the water because we still haven't really got on top of managing the land and the waters in a really strong way. And a lot's been done. There's an outfit called the Oak Creek Watershed Council. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. They're doing a lot of great work trying to restore and protect these riparian corridors. So pay attention to them, support them. There are, in conclusion, two issues that I have to leave you with because I think they relate to the ongoing necessity that we all have to try to improve on what we have today and leave something even better. The first one is kind of technical, and I'm just going to leave you with a short description. The waters of Oak Creek and the Verde River, the surface waters, are totally appropriated. You understand that. You can't start a farm or do anything because Salt River Project will be at your doorstep the next day saying, that's our water. Phoenix has got a grip on the surface waters. But the groundwater is a different story. It is totally unregulated under any form of state or local management. And as a result of that, there are thousands of wells in Lower Oak Creek and along the floodplain of the Verde River, drawing shallow water right up next to the stream. They call it groundwater, but what is it? It's water out of the stream being drawn, the water that supports the flow is being drawn by thousands of wells out in these floodplains. Not so much right here, but once you get into Lower Oak Creek, you'll start to see all these developments and stuff. And there's no limit of any kind on the amount of water that can be drawn. And it's time we do something about that. And there is a bill in the state legislature, sponsored by Regina Cobb from Kingman, to give county governments some responsibility for trying to manage this problem so that we don't drill wells on floodplains, which are eventually going to risk drying up the surface flow of these streams. So pay attention to that. For those of you who are taking notes, it's House Bill 2991. Okay, lastly, remember that the riparian habitat of Oak Creek, here and throughout its length, is the sum of a lot of tributaries that are contributing flow to make up what you see in Red Rock State Park. And for historic reasons that I am not fully conversant with, the tributaries that come from the west, that's West Clerk, the West Fork and all of those tributaries, are nicely administered by the Forest Service. You can quarrel about how nicely, but the Forest Service seriously makes a real effort to manage Oak Creek and the tributaries to the west. It's another story on the other side of Oak Creek Canyon. There is no attention or administration or planning to the tributaries that make up so much of this river. Anybody ever heard of Pump House Canyon? You know, that's Oak Creek. It starts 1 mile south of the Flagstaff Airport, and it's an extraordinary canyon that comes right down when you come below the switchbacks, straight down into Oak Creek. It's not absolutely perennial, but there's a lot of water in a big canyon there. Runs all the way up to Flagstaff. It's being impinged upon to some degree by development. Kachina Village development, which is moving off of I-17 down. You come up I-17, look out to the left. That's all draining into Oak Creek. And the Forest Service is not thinking about that. It's not even part of the Red Rock Ranger District. Munns Canyon, another wonderful example. A lot of water coming down there. That's all flowing out of Munns Park, which is beginning to develop. And there is no administrative or citizen or local or county administration and thinking about, got to protect the whole watershed. And that's a big piece. Anybody here from the Forest Service? Oh, come on, I used to run the Forest Service. I thought you... Okay, I don't mean to bang on it, but it's a curious deal. When they put the Red Rock Ranger District together, they didn't. Okay, Pump House Wash, Kelly Canyon, Munns Creek. Okay, I don't mean to get on a soapbox. You can say I've never really kind of left this place. Let me just say, it's been a wonderful nostalgic trip coming here. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're all on this landscape and that you really care about it, and just keep at it. You're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask a few questions, and after that, Patrick is going to run around and you'll all have an opportunity to ask questions from the audience. So, Bruce, the first thing I want to ask you about is the point that you just left on, which is Regina Cobb's bill that's in the legislature right now. How many times has she put this forward?
Well, Regina Cobb is one of my favorite legislators. She is a Republican from Kingman, and the water issues, the groundwater issues up outside of Kingman have gotten so severe from overdrafting with this huge expanses of industrial agriculture, thousands, tens of thousands of acres over these groundwater basins, that they're really getting desperate. There's the USGS says Kingman could be out of groundwater in this century, period. No qualification. So she has sponsored this bill, and I would say the last 4 or 5 legislative sessions, and there'll be a big push in this legislature. Who knows? But we're going to try and try and try again.
So 5 times she's put this forward, and I mean, you're the former Attorney General, former Governor of the state, former Secretary of the Interior. You've had such an incredible influence. But what about the people here today? You know, often sometimes we feel like I'm an ordinary citizen, I'm not sure what kind of real impact I can have. So can you tell the people here today what citizen voices mean to legislators, to governors, and what they can do if they care about this issue.
Look, I think you all know, but it's important to repeat. I don't exactly understand everything that's going on in the Arizona legislature these days. I'll leave it at that. But the fact is that ultimately it's citizens and voters who matter. And sometimes it seems like they're just whistling in the wind. But really, writing a letter, talking to your friends, making a phone call, they add up. And in the final analysis, that's what we're all about in this nation, in this state, in this government. So we just got to keep at it. And that's not me, just you, it's us.
Great, thank you. So there you go. You heard what he would like to see you do. So when you served as Secretary of the Interior, you were coming from Arizona, and now, today, our neighbor next door, New Mexico, New Mexico's Deb Haaland has just been named Secretary of the Interior, not just for about a year now. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the importance of that appointment and what it means to have the first Native Americans serving in that position.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant decision by President Clinton to appoint this Native American as the Secretary of the Interior. Pardon me?
Biden. Clinton was brilliant because he appointed you, but Biden's the president who appointed Haaland.
She is a New Mexico Pueblo enrolled member, has served in Congress for a good period of time, and it's a great choice. But the symbolism is important because we are gradually coming around to think of a broader vision of inclusion of Native Americans. Am I losing you? Okay, yeah, I get carried away. Okay, holler if you hear me. That's basically it, and she will, I think, help broaden this sense of inclusion of public lands and resources. It's a good point.
So I'm going to go back to something you said earlier about Regina Cobb. You said, hey, well, we know you're a Democrat, right? And you said Regina Cobb is a Republican, and I think she's a great legislator. And we see so little of that today. You know, Democrats and Republicans reaching out to one another, trying to do what is really best for our state or our country. And you've been such a model of that, not only from reaching across the aisle in terms of political party, but we talked earlier about business interests, other interests. Can you talk a little bit about your disposition, how that's helped you get things done?
Andrea, I don't want you to walk me up to the edge of that cliff and turn this into government and politics. I would just only say that what you're hinting at is correct. We've got to think of inclusion, of compromise, of drawing discussions and the processes together, and thinking about specific issues and worrying a little less about a lot of ideology. That is the end.
Okay, I won't push you off that cliff. I'm going to open it up and see if there's anybody else in this audience who might like to ask you a question. So Patrick is coming around with the microphone.
Bruce, do you have any favorite memories of being here in this area as a kid?
I'm sorry.
Do you have any favorite memories of being here as a kid?
Uh-oh. The answer is yes. It was late nights as teenagers partaking of alcoholic beverages on the banks of Slide Rock.
I'd like to get your thoughts on an issue that I think is really decimating Sedona at this point. And that's all the ATV rentals that we have. From kids going pell-mell down the trails, scaring the wildlife, coating all the trees with so much dust that the trees are dying too. These are mainly tourists, but we have these ATV companies that rent out these vehicles, and the people who by and large, not all, but the people who are renting them are tourists that just want speed, don't care about the beauty and tranquility of walking the trails.
Well, as long as you don't characterize me as a tourist, I will. Look, it's not just Sedona. It's a problem in all of these areas. The Virgin River up in Utah, the communities in Colorado. There isn't a simple answer. I do see some good vibes here. I'm staying at a hotel here where I picked up a handful of literature about preaching appropriately, about rules on the trail, about, not littering, all of that kind of stuff. We just have to work it as hard as we can. And I don't have a magic answer.
I'm wondering if you're able to speak to the Colorado River issue. I've heard different things on why some states get more water from the Colorado River. Some people say it's because they have better lobbyists, and that's why they do. Is there a way that they determine how much water each state gets from the Colorado River? Are you able to speak to that?
Okay, her invitation is for me to speak about the division of water and Arizona's travails on the Colorado River. I'm tempted to say, I wish you had cut this off before she asked that question, because this is complicated stuff. The big renegotiation of a lot of the rules among the states is going to take place in 3 years, in 2025. Arizona historically drew a short straw on the Colorado River for reasons that are highly complex. But by drawing the short straw, we have had to take the majority of the cuts that you're reading about in the newspaper now. My own view of it is, if we manage our water resources correctly, we can make do. Not going to be easy, but the doomsday predictions that you read about aren't necessarily true. But they are an invitation to continue to really work on these water issues and to think about how water is allocated among industrial, agriculture, development sectors. Now, there's one other background piece here that we just have to deal with, and that is climate change, because it has now been quite clearly established that with each 2 degrees of warming, ambient temperature warming, the flow of the Colorado River goes down about 10%. That's related to very complicated issues. It's not just how much precipitation, it's what happens to it. because of the drying, the issues of the ground soaking up, sublimation off snowpacks. But that's just a way of saying it's not going to get any better. Number one, not going to get better. It's going to get worse. We can manage it, provided we're serious about it. And that's us.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned the Forest Service, or I've raised my hand. I spent a career with the Forest Service. I was born in Wyoming in 1933. Started work on the Bighorn National Forest in '59. Worked in Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, and Utah. I'm not so familiar with there, but I love to visit. But Idaho has a lot of the Idaho batholith soils, and the water comes in, and a lot of erosion. You have springs even in summer and fall. In Utah, and I suppose here to a great extent, it's like a tin roof, it runs off. And when we talk about Colorado River, well, Wyoming has water running out of it 4 directions, but anyway, there isn't any water when it gets very far down. And go by Lake Mead or Lake Powell, it's not there. And the only way I think we can do this is, years ago I was up in Idaho when Cecil Andrus was elected governor. Sometime later, Al Simpson, who I went to school with, and they were Republican and Democrat, and they were great friends, and they worked things out. We need to do that. Oh, and I want you to have a copy of that.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Governor. I'd like you to know that that Sedona and the other Verde Valley communities are always strongly supporting water issues, and we will definitely make sure, although I can't speak for the whole council, I'm just the mayor, I can't say on my own, but I'm sure we can write a letter from the city of Sedona, and I think all of the Verde Valley cities and towns will support Senator Cobb's bill.
Thank you.
So I have been serving on what we call a Sustaining Flows Council since I've been in the last few years that I've been in office. That's focused on maintaining the flow in the Verde. And as I'm sure you're aware, the Native American communities they see the river as life, and they are also very focused on it. So we're fortunate to have that community that's so close to our community, and we all focus on the river. So it's really important, and we're very aware of that, and we will do that. Here's a question, totally off the subject of that, but you brought up earlier about the concept of having a lieutenant governor, and I'm wondering if you think that maybe Arizona should have a lieutenant governor?
Oh, I don't know. Let's see, there's 2 different questions. Let me see if I can. The lieutenant governor issue is not as terrible as it sounds. We have an elected governor, an elected secretary of state, who in most respects is kind of a lieutenant governor. And that's what happened to me. I guess I got to go on. The governor, Governor Castro, in the 1970s, resigned to become an ambassador to Argentina. Under the state constitution, the Secretary of State is the successor of the Lieutenant Governor, but only if that Secretary of State has taken the position by election. When Castro left, the elected Secretary of State became governor. The Secretary of State who was appointed was not in the constitutional succession. Here I am. Now, just a word about the Verde River. There's a wonderful group called the Friends of the Verde River. And the things they're working on are really absolutely identical to what you're doing here on Oak Creek. And I hope that you can all kind of take a few cues and learn from each other, because they've really got a vigorous crowd going in Cottonwood and Clarkdale. And it's one watershed, so have at it. Thank you.
First of all, Mr. Babbitt, thank you so much for your involvement with saving Red Rock State Park from development. I'm a 49-year resident of the Red Rock Loop Road. I live right across the street from the failed development Bella Terra. This is not on the water issue or anything. This is about the traffic on the road of the Red Rock Loop Road. The county of Yavapai has passed a subdivision just down the street from me that has created so much traffic on the Red Rock Loop Road with no abatement of speed. And you told earlier that if you keep contacting people to take care of the problem, that would do it. Well, I've been on the phone to every single person in line to help control the speed, just the speed, not the amount of people. ATVs, Jeep companies, tourism, and now contractors by the tenfold, since there's 13 houses right now going up in the Sedona Ranch that are in all excess of over 5,000 square feet. So it takes a lot of people to do this work. All I have been asking for, and the whole neighborhood agrees with us, is to put a couple of speed humps on that road to no avail. I have made probably 40 phone calls and 50 emails to our county. Who do I contact, and how do I get this problem looked at by someone of influence such as yourself?
Well, thank you for suggesting that I have any influence. I had somebody call me a couple of months ago about the highway department redoing 89 through Oak Creek Canyon. And it turns out that they were discarding the chalks from the road. They were throwing them over the bank. And all this junk was, piling up along the creek. I called the State Department of Transportation. And I said, introduced myself. And they said, well, who? What's your name? And I was kind of charitable. And it's been more than a few years since I was there. Seriously, to your question, are you in the Sedona city limits? Well, you're stuck then with the Arizona Highway Department. Yeah. That's basically saying, I wish I could come back and be recreated to help you. Not much chance. Well, you're all working on the transportation problems. I don't have any wisdom, except I am certain that the day will come when there will be a critical mass of demand to do real mass transit. It's going to be complicated. It's been done elsewhere. On my watch as secretary, we did it in the big national park in southeast, in Zion National Park. It was hugely controversial. President Clinton calls me up and says, Bruce, why are they all complaining? And by the way, doesn't Utah have some electoral votes for the next election? But we did it, we got it done. And you go to Zion National Park now, and forget about driving around the park. You just don't do it. That day will come. For those of you of the next generation, keep at it.
Bruce, another Bruce. I'm right here. So it appears to me that the big picture issue is the conflict between uncontrolled population growth, uncontrolled commercialization in Arizona, at the same time that we're in a very critical water situation. So we have all these people moving in, all these businesses moving in, and we're trying to balance off the water situation and the preservation. And that seems to me to almost be an unreconcilable conflict without some controls on the population growth and the commercialization, or solving the water problem. And I don't see the water problem being solved very, very soon. California doesn't want to do desalination plants. They don't want to pay for them. And the water from the Colorado is evaporating into, as you referenced earlier, this arcane agreement that was made years ago. So hopefully something will happen in 3 years. But how do you reconcile that, the uncontrolled population growth, the uncontrolled commercialization, and the preservation?
Like I was saying, Andrea, isn't it time to close this down? Okay. Number one, you can't close the doors, period. One thought about water. Keep in mind that in Arizona, 75% of the water is used for agriculture. 75%. And if we look at experiences elsewhere in the West that have these water problems, there you can see some gradual kind of market-based transitioning from some low-value agriculture toward urban uses. Now, I know that's not going to satisfy you because you're trying to slow down the urban growth, and I'm telling you it can't. Okay. Oh, I can't wait for the next question. We're really making progress.
I promise to be kinder. Okay, that's all I can promise. I'm right here. I'm so inspired by what you did to create Slide Rock Park and the Red Rock State Park. I've been here 20 years, so I've been able to enjoy these spaces that you have helped create for us. So I'm really grateful. And I also wanted to ask you, what's going on now as far as at the state level, or even city level? Are there plans to save other areas in our community from development? Because development is the biggest issue on the table right now in this community as far as Airbnbs and the ATVs that someone mentioned, off-roading, and all the problems it's causing, the homelessness explosion in our community and the lack of affordable housing. So are there any people or groups working on setting aside other areas for public use that you know of?
Okay, you got to help me with that question. I'm not as young as you are, and I didn't quite hear it all.
Basically, I wanted to ask you, are there groups that you're working with, or at the state level, are they trying to set aside other areas of the Verde Valley to protect it as protected land for public use?
Oh, public land. You're talking about land development in the Verde Valley. Yeah, public land. The Verde Valley is going to be the next big area of public policy discussion. In a broad way, we can see that Sedona is bracketed by national forest land. As you look down into the Verde Valley, it's quite different. The broad base from the early agriculture in the valley is mostly private, a huge chunk of private land. There's a huge block of state land as you leave where we are today and head down toward Cottonwood. And the valley is growing in an extraordinary way. One reason for that, I think, is that climate change is heating up Phoenix and Tucson to the point that developers are starting to look up to the next elevation level because of climate change. And we're going to see that converging in the Verde Valley. And we really need a state-driven, federally cooperating, local government plan. I don't see it happening. And you're right to point that out as something we should worry about. And, you know, keep Sedona beautiful, wherever you are. I think you might consider an asterisk below keep Sedona beautiful saying, and the Verde Valley.
That is in our new mission statement. The new mission statement notes Sedona and the Verde Valley.
I don't.
We've got time for 2 more questions, and then if Mr. Babbitt will be out in the lobby, you can ask him if you don't have a chance. We're going to go right here, and then I'll go up in the left, the balcony. So these 2 here, and then Andrea will wrap it up.
Thank you, Governor, for your prophetic words about mass transit and managing our water. I'm a newcomer, but I'm going to do all I can to support this state because this is a beautiful state, and I come from Southern California where we have the same problems. So I'm well aware of water waste and all that goes with it, and I will do whatever I can to support this beautiful state. Thank you for prophetic words, and thank you for your service. I want to close on a high note. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Last question up here in the balcony.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Thank you for all you've done for our area. I'm up here.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, again. Well, first of all, regarding water, we send oil to places to be refined with great controversy. Water might not be quite as much controversy to ship water from where it is. But I'd like to ask a question about what you feel the change in zeitgeist in this country has been. I'm a boomer. We grew up, everyone loved Smokey Bear. Everyone loved Woodsy Owl. And now we can't even get people to agree that there is such a thing as climate change, even though they see the devastating effects around it. What do you feel has happened in our country? Is it the shift from rural to urban? Or what's going on? This is in your opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think broadly, there is, an ongoing shift from rural to urban in every part of this country. In terms of urban planning, big issues. But as the shift goes away from rural areas in terms of conservation and land use and protection, I think there will open up even more opportunities for good conservation at all levels. National parks, wilderness areas, state areas, private land protection that the Nature Conservancy does so much with. So, my prediction that there will be some leveling out of rural populations obviously does not apply to Sedona. You are going to be dealing with urbanization in a big way. But overall, I'm not sure if that's the exact thrust of your question. That's as much as I can take it. I think that the transitions always, if you're out there looking around and scrounging around on the land, are going to reveal opportunities in terms of the way we live on the land that will help us as we move forward.
So I just want to tell everybody here, a few years ago when we decided to make this film, the benefactors just reached out to Bruce Babbitt and said, hey, we're making a new film. Would you be in it? And he said, sure. And came down here, flew in, spent time at the park, spent time with the benefactors, did so much work here. And the park opened to the public in 1991. I think we said that. But by 1991, he was already in Washington. He was no longer here. So it's been a while, right? And he went on to establish public lands across the western United States and has never really stopped and is working for land preservation in the Amazon right now, doing that work globally. So some of these local questions, which you very kindly entertained, he's gone on to continue this very important work. And yet when the benefactors reached out, so he came in to be filmed for the movie, and we called back and we said, hey, we've got the movie, would you come to the film festival? And he said, sure, when is it? And I said, well, these days, when can you be here? He's like, anytime, you tell me. So we are just so fortunate for the great work that he's done here in the Verde Valley, in Arizona, in this country, and throughout the world. So please join me in thanking Bruce Babbitt for his tremendous service.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Mr. Bruce Babbitt. Thank you, benefactors of the Red Rock State Park. Please visit their table. Visit the Health First Foundation's table. Visit Mr. Babbitt, who will be out in the lobby. Check it out on the red carpet. Thank you all so much for coming.